The English novelist Thomas Hardy had a tendency in his writing to locate whatever action he was depicting in his novels against a backdrop of really remote antiquity. He does this in The Return of the Native, where the places out on the heath in England, the old mounds, play a significant part in the action of the contemporary world that he's depicting. The same is true in Tess of the D'Urbervilles, where the last scenes involve Tess, who has been deceived and betrayed, finally dying in a kind of sacrifice on the stones at Stonehenge, which ties her death back into an older, darker, more faded sense of the world that Hardy very deliberately evokes in the course of his novels. He does the same thing in The Mayor of Casterbridge and others, always locating contemporary love in particular against that old backdrop of suffering, of fatality, of mythical meaning, archetypal sensibilities, and so on. He does the same thing when he stops writing novels and turns to poetry, which he, like Melville, whom I'll look at in another poem, take up as a kind of alternative to the longer endeavor of fiction. Both of them probably because their fiction didn't get the attention they thought it deserved. Certainly Melville's did not, and Hardy had some of the same frustrations, I think. This is a poem of Hardy's called In Time of the Breaking of Nations. And I ask you to look at this short 12-line poem with a sense of its ominousness almost. He divides these three stanzas with Roman numerals, almost as though each were a major section in some kind of larger undertaking that he has in mind. Okay, let's read the poem, In Time of the Breaking of Nations, a phrase, by the way, that he seems to have taken from the Bible, but also he has in mind World War I. He has in mind the collapse of the old orders that were so notably the case in World War I. Okay, the poem. 1. Only a man harrowing clods in a slow, silent walk, with an old horse that stumbles and nods, half asleep as they stalk. 2. Only thin smoke without flame from the heaps of couch grass. Yet this will go onward the same, though dynasties pass. 3. Yonder a maid and her white come whispering by. War's annals will cloud into night ere their story die. Just a few comments here. As in W.H. Auden's Musée des Beaux-Arts, which we looked at earlier in this series, Hardy is pointing to the continuity of daily life that goes on regardless of what the larger movements of history might be. So here, the man plowing, harrowing clods with an old horse that stumbles and nods, half asleep as they stalk. Not even a complete sentence. This image of the man, the horse, the harrow, the soil that always needs to be tilled. Again, in the second stanza, this burning up the couch grass, this weed that affects your crops. And this is going to go on regardless of what is happening in the larger histories, though dynasties pass. These same things need to be done simply as part of the human condition. And then the third stanza, a maid and her white. That word white is interesting. J.R.R. Tolkien takes it up with a very ominous sense in The Lord of the Rings. These are living beings, but they're ghostly. They have some sort of darker spiritual being. But in Hardy's use here, it simply seems to mean a maid and her man, though the white carries a connotation of something bad that's going to happen to him, which in Hardy's novels is usually the case. But in any event, this ending, war's annals will cloud into night ere their story die. In other words, the human experience always comes back to man and woman, to the story of their love, perhaps of their tragedies, but always this relation which really defines what it is that the human condition is about.